There is a conversation that happens every night inside the mind of the poor man, and it has been happening so long that he no longer hears it. It runs beneath his awareness like a current beneath a frozen river, invisible from the surface, but responsible for the direction of everything that flows above it. He does not know the conversation is happening. He would deny it if you told him. He would look at you with the patient frustration of a man who believes he has tried everything and found the world ungenerous. But the conversation is there. It was there last night. It will be there tonight. And unless something interrupts it permanently, it will be there on the last night of his life, still running, still building, still delivering to him the precise circumstances that match its content. I want you to understand something before I speak another word. I am not here to flatter you. I am not here to make you feel good about where you are. I spent 20 years studying the minds of the wealthiest men this nation ever produced, men whose names are carved into the architecture of American civilization. And what I found at the foundation of every single fortune was not luck, not inheritance, not accident of birth. What I found was a pattern of thought so consistent, so deliberate, and so different from the pattern of thought operating in the majority of men that it might as well be a different language spoken by a different species. The rich man and the poor man are not separated by opportunity. They are separated by what they say to themselves when no one is listening. They are separated by the conversation they carry into sleep every single night. I have sat in the study of Andrew Carnegie and listened as that man described the invisible machinery that built the greatest steel empire the world had ever seen. I have walked the corridors of Thomas Edison's laboratory and watched a man who had failed 10,000 times approach the next attempt with the calm certainty of someone who already knew the outcome. I have shaken the hand of Henry Ford and felt in that grip the resolution of a man who decided what the world would become and then simply refused to accept any other version of it. These were not gifted men in the way that word is commonly used. They were not visited by fortune or favored by coincidence. They were men who had, either by accident or by deliberate study, learned the law that governs all human achievement. And the law, once you understand it, is as precise and as reliable as the law of gravity. It does not take sides. It does not favor the educated or the well-born. It operates with the same indifference in the life of the laborer as in the life of the magnate. The only difference is whether you are obeying it or violating it, whether you are applying it consciously or having it applied to you unconsciously by the accumulated weight of your habits and fears. The poor man lying in his bed tonight is not failing because the world is against him. He is failing because the law is operating through him without his knowledge and delivering to his life the precise equivalent of the thoughts he has most consistently held. This is not cruelty. This is precision. The universe does not punish the ignorant. It simply obeys the instruction it receives. And the instruction the average man transmits every night as his body grows still and his guard drops and his conscious mind releases its grip is an instruction built from fear, from doubt, from the accumulated repetition of everything he has been told he cannot have and cannot become. The subconscious mind, that great builder of circumstances, receives this instruction faithfully, without argument, without resistance, and goes to work building what it has been commanded to build. That is the secret the poor man keeps repeating, not to anyone else, to himself, every night. In the silence between waking and sleeping, when the deepest part of his mind is most receptive, he repeats it without knowing he is repeating it. He repeats it in the language of his habitual thoughts, his settled beliefs, his unexamined assumptions about what is possible for a man like him. And the world he wakes to every morning is the faithful reproduction of what he commanded in the night. This is the law. This is the secret. And before this night is over, you are going to understand it completely, and you are going to have in your possession the tools to change the instruction forever. Now let me show you precisely where you are and why you are there, not because I wish to wound you, but because a man cannot navigate toward a destination he refuses to locate on the map. The first law of navigation is knowing your current position. So let us look, without flinching, at the condition of the average mind and what that condition produces. The majority of men drift. This is not my observation alone. This was the observation of every man of great achievement I studied during my 20 years of research into the science of success. They all noted it. They all named it. Carnegie called it the absence of definiteness. Edison called it the failure of organized thought. Ford called it the unwillingness to decide. But they were all describing the same condition, which is the condition of a man who has never made a firm, irrevocable decision about what he intends to become and what he intends to accomplish with the days that have been given to him. The drifter is not a bad man. He is not a lazy man in the way that word is typically understood. He works. Sometimes he works very hard. He rises early. He fulfills his obligations. He does what is placed in front of him. But he works without direction, without a definite chief aim, without the burning central purpose that transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary result. He is, in the language of mechanics, all motion and no momentum. He moves in every direction and therefore arrives nowhere in particular. I want you to understand how this condition forms in a man, because it does not form all at once. It forms the way a river carves a canyon, slowly, imperceptibly, through the continuous application of a force so subtle that no single day makes a visible difference, but 10 years produces a landscape that looks immovable. The drifting begins in childhood, when the world imposes its first set of limitations on the young mind. It is accelerated in adolescence, when the opinion of others becomes the most powerful force in a young person's life, and the desire to belong overcomes the desire to become. It hardens in early adulthood, when the first encounters with failure install in the mind the belief that failure is personal, that it is evidence of inadequacy rather than evidence of incomplete application of principle. And by the time the average man is 30 years old, the pattern is set. The conversation is running. And every night it runs a little deeper, carving its channels a little more firmly into the architecture of his expectations, until what began as a temporary response to circumstance has become what he calls his personality, his nature, himself. The average man does not believe he has given up. That is the most precise and important thing I can tell you about him. He does not experience himself as someone who has surrendered. He has constructed, through years of careful mental labor, an entire philosophical system that explains and justifies his position. He knows why the world is unfair. He knows why certain men succeed and others do not. And his explanation places the cause entirely outside himself. The system, the economy, the family he was born into, the breaks that never came, the doors that never opened. He can explain all of it with great fluency, and his explanation is always coherent, always emotionally satisfying, and always wrong. Not wrong in every particular. The world is genuinely unfair in many particulars, but wrong in the most important particular, which is the location of the cause. The cause is never outside the man. The cause is always the thought he has most persistently held. This is the law. This is the first law. And until a man accepts it completely, without reservation and without exception, he cannot begin the work of transformation. I am going to tell you now about Edwin C. Barnes, because his story is the clearest illustration I know of the law in operation. Barnes was a man of no particular advantage. He had no money, no connections, no technical education, and no prior relationship with the man he intended to work alongside. What he had was a decision so complete, so total, so absolutely without compromise, that it reorganized everything in his environment to accommodate it. Barnes decided in a single afternoon that he would become the business partner of Thomas Edison, not an employee, a partner. He did not make this decision as a wish. He did not make it as a hope or a dream or an aspiration. He made it as a fact about his future that had not yet become visible in his present. He held that decision with such consistency and such conviction that the subjective reality of it preceded the objective reality by years. He arrived at Edison's laboratory by freight train because he could not afford a ticket. He talked his way into an interview. He was given a menial position and told nothing about partnership. A lesser man would have taken this as a signal that the decision was wrong. Barnes took it as a step on the path toward a decision that was already made. He stayed, he worked, he waited, he did not waver. And the day came when Edison needed a man to market his Ediphone dictating machine, a product that Edison's own sales organization had abandoned as unsellable. And Barnes stepped forward with the absolute certainty of a man who has been waiting for exactly this moment. He sold that machine. He sold it in quantities that astonished everyone who witnessed it. And Thomas Edison, who spent his life making precise observations about the nature of men, looked at Barnes and said, "There is a man who wanted something so badly that he was willing to stake everything on it. Let him have what he came for." That is definiteness of purpose. That is the master key. Not wanting, not hoping, not trying, deciding. Irrevocably, completely, and without provision for retreat. Now let me speak to you about the law of thought, because until you understand this law at its root, the rest of what I have to teach you will remain interesting information rather than transforming principle. The outer world of every man is the mirror of his inner world. I do not offer this as a metaphor. I offer it as a statement of mechanical fact as reliable as any law recorded in any physics textbook. The conditions of your life, your finances, your relationships, your health, your status among men, these are not things that happen to you. They are things that were built by the dominant thoughts you have most consistently entertained in the privacy of your own mind. This is a hard statement. I know it is hard. I knew it was hard when Carnegie first pressed it upon me, sitting in that great library of his, surrounded by the evidence of what organized thought can produce. I resisted it for a time, as every honest man resists a truth that places full responsibility upon himself. But resistance to a law does not suspend the law. The law operates whether you believe in it or not. Consider Thomas Edison. Here was a man who failed, by his own count, more than 10,000 times in his attempt to produce the incandescent light bulb. 10,000 failures. And yet at no point in that sequence of apparent failure did Edison's inner world mirror the outer circumstances. His outer world was a laboratory full of experiments that had not yet worked. His inner world was the unshakable certainty that the answer existed and that he would find it. He famously said, "I have not failed. I have successfully discovered 10,000 ways that will not work." This was not bravado. This was not performance for the press. This was an accurate description of the state of his inner world. He genuinely experienced each failed experiment as information rather than defeat, because his thought was organized around a definition of success so complete that failure could not be incorporated into it. The outer world tried to deliver him defeat, and he refused to accept the delivery. And the light bulb eventually came, not despite the 10,000 failures, but in some essential way because of them, because each one refined the thought, sharpened the focus, and moved the organized mind closer to the specific answer it sought. Carnegie understood this law so precisely that he built his entire system of wealth creation around it. He did not hire men primarily for their technical skills, though skills were necessary. He hired men for the quality of their dominant thought. He would sit across a table from a man and ask him about the things he thought about most often, the things that occupied his mind in the quiet moments of the day. And from that conversation, he would determine whether the man's inner world was organized around growth or around maintenance, around possibility or around limitation, around the law of increase or around the fear of loss. He could build the skills. He could not change the thought. He knew this. And every man he elevated to a position of great responsibility was a man whose inner world was already producing the results that Carnegie wanted before Carnegie placed him in the position to produce them at scale. Henry Ford believed in the assembly line before the assembly line existed. He believed in it so completely, so specifically, so with the detail of a man who has already walked through something that has not yet been built, that the men who worked for him had no choice but to build what he could already see. His engineers told him it could not be done. He told them it would be done. He was not arguing with them about engineering. He was expressing the nature of his inner world, which had already manufactured the reality before the physical materials were assembled. Ford understood, perhaps without being able to articulate it in philosophical terms, that the outer world is a latecomer. It always arrives after the inner world has finished building. The only question is the quality of the inner world. The only question is whether the thought being held is the thought of the life you intend or the thought of the life you fear. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them. Speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you, I am a thinking, deciding, creating being. The world I inhabit is the product of the thought I have most consistently held. I am not the victim of circumstance. I am the author of circumstance. I take full and absolute possession of my mind today. I choose what I think. I choose what I believe. I choose what I accept as true about myself and about what is possible for me. My thought is the first cause of every condition in my life. I am now, in this moment, exercising my power as the first cause. I am planting the seed of a definite, burning desire for the life I intend to live. That desire is now taking root in my subconscious mind. It will grow. It will strengthen. It will organize every faculty I possess around its achievement. I am committed to this desire with my entire being. I act on it daily. I speak it into the air with the conviction of a man who already possesses it. The law of thought is working for me now, at this moment, and it will not stop. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. Now I want to speak to you about definiteness of purpose, and I want to make a distinction that may be the most important distinction you will encounter in a lifetime of seeking improvement. There is a profound and absolute difference between wishing and deciding. Most men spend their entire lives on the wrong side of that distinction. They wish for better circumstances. They wish for more money, for better health, for more meaningful relationships, for a life that corresponds to the one they sense somewhere inside themselves is possible. But wishing is passive. Wishing extends the hand without committing the body. Wishing says, I would like this if the world should be so generous as to deliver it without my full surrender to the process of attaining it. Deciding says something entirely different. Deciding says this thing is mine, and I am now in the process of claiming it, and nothing that happens between this moment and the moment of its physical arrival in my life will cause me to release my claim. When Carnegie described to me the moment he made his fortune inevitable, he did not describe a plan. He described a decision. He told me that there was a specific moment, which he could locate precisely in his memory, when the fortune was no longer something he intended to pursue and became something he intended to have. The shift was internal. Nothing in the external world had changed. He had no more money than he had the day before. He had no more connections, no more resources, no more apparent advantages. What he had was a different relationship with the certainty of the outcome. He had moved from hoping to knowing. And the moment he moved into knowing, the external world began to rearrange itself around the new internal reality. This is the difference between definiteness of purpose and mere desire. Definiteness of purpose is a decision made in the deepest chambers of the mind, a decision so complete that the subconscious mind receives it not as a request, but as an instruction, not as a possibility, but as a fact about the future that the subconscious is now tasked with manifesting in the present. The definite chief aim is the organizing principle around which the entire mental machinery of a human being aligns itself. When it is absent, all that mental machinery runs idle, generating heat without generating progress. When it is present and burning with the force of genuine desire, every faculty of the mind becomes a tool of its accomplishment. I have observed this phenomenon in the lives of every great achiever I have ever studied. Without exception, each man could identify the moment of decision with the clarity of a physical event. It was not gradual. It was not incremental. It was a point, a specific point, before which they were drifting and after which they were moving. The decision reorganized everything instantaneously at the level of thought, and then, over time, the physical world caught up with what had already been settled internally. This is the mechanism. This is how it works. The decision comes first. The circumstance follows. Now let me teach you about faith, because there is perhaps no more misunderstood word in the vocabulary of achievement. Most men believe faith is a feeling they must wait to receive. They say they will move when they feel confident, when they feel ready, when they feel certain. And so they wait. And the feeling never arrives, because the feeling of faith is not something that precedes action. It is something that is manufactured through action, and more specifically, through the deliberate practice that I call autosuggestion. Faith is not a gift from the universe, distributed randomly to those it favors. Faith is a manufactured state of mind, produced through the deliberate, consistent, emotionally charged repetition of specific thought. When you speak a thing aloud with conviction, when you repeat it in the morning when you rise and in the evening before you sleep, and in the quiet moments throughout the day when the conscious mind relaxes its grip, when you do this with emotion, with feeling, with the physical sensation of the desire already fulfilled, you are engaging the mechanism of autosuggestion, and you are, quite literally, manufacturing faith in the laboratory of your own mind. Edison did not feel confident before he produced the light bulb. He had a manufactured certainty that was not dependent on the evidence of his senses, because the evidence of his senses was 10,000 failures. Ford did not feel certain that his assembly line would work before it worked. He had a manufactured certainty built through the constant and repeated visualization of the thing he intended to produce. Carnegie did not feel wealthy before he was wealthy. He had a manufactured certainty about his wealth that was, in the deepest sense, more real to him than the poverty of his early circumstances. These were not men of unusual emotional constitution. They were men who had discovered, some by study and some by the accidental wisdom of practice, that the mind can be instructed to believe what it has not yet seen, and that this instruction, when given consistently and with emotional intensity, becomes indistinguishable from the certainty that comes from direct experience. The daily practice of autosuggestion is this. You will take your definite chief aim, the one burning desire that you have decided to make the organizing principle of your life, and you will write it down in a single statement, not a list, one statement. You will read it aloud twice each day, once in the morning immediately upon rising, before the world has had a chance to introduce its contradictions, and once in the evening, immediately before sleep, when the gateway to the subconscious mind is at its most open and receptive. You will read it with feeling. You will not read it as an exercise. You will read it as a declaration. You will hear your own voice speaking the thing you intend into the air, and that voice will carry it back to your own ears, and through your ears into the subconscious, and the subconscious will receive it as it receives all things, without argument, without judgment, and go to work building it into your circumstances. This is not mysticism. This is mechanics. The mechanics are as reliable as any law of physics. The subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a physically real one. This is not a theory. This is a fact that has been demonstrated in every serious study of the human mind. When you speak your desire with conviction and feel its reality before it has arrived, the subconscious mind receives it as a reality and begins organizing your thoughts, your words, your actions, your perceptions, and your environment around the task of making it physically manifest. This is the mechanism of faith. This is how faith is manufactured. And any man who applies this practice consistently, without exception, without apology, and without the self-consciousness of a man who fears being thought foolish, will find within a period measurable in weeks and months, not decades, that his outer world has begun to shift in the direction of the inner reality he has been building. Now let me take you deeper, into the architecture of the subconscious mind itself, because this is where the real teaching lives, and this is where the difference between the life you have been living and the life you intend to live will ultimately be decided. The subconscious mind is the builder of all circumstances. It is not a passive storage facility, though it does store everything. It is an active, creative, organizing force that works without ceasing, that does not rest when the body rests, that does not pause when the conscious mind turns its attention to other things. The subconscious mind is always building. The only question is what it is building, and the answer to that question is always found in the dominant thought that has most consistently been delivered to it through the mechanism of conscious attention and emotion. Here is the critical fact that the majority of men have never been taught, and that changes everything once it is understood. The subconscious mind does not evaluate the content of what is delivered to it. It does not distinguish between a thought of abundance and a thought of poverty, between a thought of faith and a thought of fear, between a thought of health and a thought of illness. It receives all things with equal acceptance, and builds with equal diligence what it has been handed. The man who spends his days thinking about what he lacks delivers to his subconscious a detailed instruction for the manufacture of lack. The man who spends his days thinking about what he intends to build delivers to his subconscious a detailed instruction for the manufacture of that building. Both instructions are executed with identical faithfulness. The law has no opinion about which it prefers. It simply builds what it receives. This is why the poor man stays poor while working as hard as any rich man. This is why effort alone never produces wealth. A man can strain against his circumstances with everything he has for 40 years and find himself in precisely the same position at the end of those 40 years as at the beginning, if the thought governing that effort is the thought of inadequacy, of fear, of doubt, of the permanent and insurmountable nature of the obstacles before him. The effort is real. The exhaustion is real. But the subconscious mind has been building walls while the conscious mind was trying to walk through them, because the dominant thought was always about the wall, never about the world beyond it. The man who wishes to transform his circumstances must first transform the instruction he is delivering to his subconscious mind. He must change the channel, as it were, of the dominant thought that runs through his inner world. And this change cannot be accomplished by a single decision, however sincere, because the subconscious mind responds to repetition, not to intention. Intention without repetition is noise. Repetition of the right thought, delivered with emotional conviction, consistently and without exception, over a sustained period of time. That is the signal the subconscious recognizes and responds to. This is the law of autosuggestion. This is the engine of transformation. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them, speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you. My subconscious mind is a builder of circumstances. It works for me now, at this moment, building the conditions that match my dominant thought. I choose my dominant thought. I feed my subconscious mind thoughts of abundance, of power, of health, of love, of definite achievement. I do not deliver to my subconscious mind thoughts of fear or doubt or limitation, for I know that it will build whatever I deliver to it with equal faithfulness. I am now delivering the instruction of my definite chief aim to my subconscious mind with emotion and with conviction. My subconscious mind receives this instruction. It organizes every resource available to it, every thought, every word, every encounter, every circumstance, in service of the accomplishment of this aim. The builder within me is working. The builder within me cannot fail if the instruction is delivered consistently. I am consistent. I am faithful to my desire. My subconscious mind is faithful to me. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. Now I must speak to you about the enemies. I must name them by their true names, strip away the respectable disguises they wear, and show you what you have been obeying without knowing it. These are the 6 ghosts of fear, and there is not a man alive who has not encountered every one of them in his own mind. Most men encounter them daily. Most men have made a kind of accommodation with them, a peace treaty that they call wisdom and that I call surrender. I am going to name each ghost, show you how it operates, and then hand you the law that dissolves it. The first ghost is the fear of poverty. Of all the 6, this is the most destructive, the most pervasive, and the most cunningly disguised. The fear of poverty does not usually appear in a man's mind as fear. It appears as prudence. It appears as caution. It appears as the very reasonable observation that resources are limited and risk is real, and that a man who has mouths to feed cannot afford to gamble on uncertain possibilities. This is how poverty fear disguises itself, as the responsible thought, the mature thought, the thought of a man who has learned from experience and taken the world seriously. But examine it more closely and you will see what it actually produces. It produces paralysis at the moment of decision. It produces the careful calculation that reveals why every opportunity is too risky. It produces the willingness to stay in a situation that is reliably unsatisfying rather than risk the possibility of something genuinely good. The man governed by poverty fear does not live his life. He ensures it. He manages it. He protects it from all risk, including the risk of greatness. He calls this caution, but it is captivity, and the chains are made of thoughts so familiar that he no longer feels them. The poverty ghost was given to most men by their parents, who received it from their parents, who received it from a world that genuinely was more dangerous and more scarce than the one we inhabit today. The instruction was transmitted across generations in phrases so common they have the feel of wisdom. Don't get too big for your britches. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Be grateful for what you have. Don't reach above your station. These phrases are not malicious. They were spoken by people who loved the men they were cautioning. But they installed in those men a thought pattern about money and possibility that guaranteed the perpetuation of the very poverty they feared. The poverty ghost feeds on these inherited thoughts and grows stronger with every year a man fails to examine what he has been taught to believe about wealth and his relationship to it. The law that dissolves the poverty ghost is the law of definiteness applied to abundance. You dissolve the fear of poverty not by eliminating the fact of your current poverty, but by replacing the dominant thought of poverty with the dominant thought of your specific, measurable, time-bound intention for wealth. You do not fight the ghost. You replace what the ghost was standing in. Where there was a vague fear of not having enough, you install a specific, burning, emotionally charged desire for the precise amount you intend to accumulate by a specific date through a specific service you intend to render in exchange for it. The ghost cannot coexist with that level of specificity. Poverty fear lives in vagueness. Definiteness of desire is the light that vagueness cannot survive. I declare now that poverty has no claim on me. I am the thinking cause of my financial conditions. I choose abundance. I choose it specifically. I choose it decisively, and I choose it now. The second ghost is the fear of criticism. This ghost may be more destructive than the first, because while the fear of poverty attacks only a man's financial life, the fear of criticism attacks his identity, his voice, his willingness to be seen, his willingness to act. The man governed by the fear of criticism has learned, usually in childhood, that the opinion of others is dangerous, that standing out invites attack, that being different from the group is costly. He has learned to manage himself in relation to the imagined judgment of others, trimming away the parts of himself that might draw comment, hiding his ambitions so they cannot be ridiculed, presenting to the world a carefully reduced version of what he actually is, so that the actual version cannot be rejected. This accommodation to the fear of criticism destroys more human potential than any other single force in the world of the mind. It is the reason most men die having never tried the thing they most wanted to try. It is the reason most great ideas are executed by the second man to think of them, because the first man was afraid to say them out loud. The criticism ghost was given to most men by peers in adolescence, when the need for belonging is so powerful that any threat to it feels like a threat to survival. But it is sustained in adulthood by the habit of checking every intention against the imagined verdict of others before committing to it. The man who cannot act without first predicting how his action will be received by others has outsourced his life to the opinions of people who will not live it. He is renting out his future to landlords who have no investment in it. The law that dissolves the fear of criticism is this: the opinion of another man about your potential is not a fact. It is that man's thought, generated by that man's experience, filtered through that man's limitations, delivered to you as if it were information about you, when it is actually only information about him. A man who has never crossed the ocean cannot tell you what you will find on the other side. Reject his verdict as incompetent testimony and proceed. The only opinion of your potential that matters is the one you hold inside your own mind, and that opinion can be changed by you, immediately, through the deliberate application of the principles I am teaching you tonight. I declare now that no man's opinion of me has power over my intentions. I am the sole author of my future. The judgments of others are the concern of those who make them. I walk forward. The third ghost is the fear of ill health. This ghost operates through the imagination, using the vast creative power of the human mind against the body it inhabits. The man who fears ill health focuses his thought on symptoms, on vulnerability, on the fragility of the physical vessel, and through the mechanism of the subconscious mind, which accepts what thought delivers and builds accordingly, he manufactures in his own body the very conditions he fears. This is not metaphor. The relationship between dominant thought and physical condition is one of the most thoroughly documented phenomena in the history of medicine, though medicine has been slow to integrate this understanding into practice. What a man consistently fears, with emotional intensity and detailed imagination, his subconscious mind treats as an instruction, and his body begins to obey. The man who is certain he will develop his father's heart condition is significantly more likely to develop it than the man who holds the same genetic history but does not carry the certainty of the outcome. The law that dissolves the fear of ill health is the same law that governs all fear. Replace it with its opposite, held with the same emotional intensity. Do not merely stop thinking about illness. Begin thinking, with the same specificity and intensity, about the vibrant, capable, energized physical state you intend to maintain. Feed the subconscious the instruction of health with the same consistency and conviction that fear was feeding it the instruction of illness, and the subconscious will build accordingly. I declare now that my body is a faithful servant of my dominant thought. I choose thoughts of strength, vitality, and wholeness. My physical condition reflects my mental decision. The fourth ghost is the fear of loss of love. This ghost holds many men in circumstances that do not serve them, relationships that diminish them, situations that confine them, because the thought of losing the affection or approval of another person is experienced as more threatening than the slow erosion of their own potential. The man governed by this fear shapes himself around the preferences of those he loves, not from genuine love, which never requires self-erasure, but from the terror of abandonment. He becomes what he thinks others need him to be, and in becoming that, he loses what he actually is, and the love he was so desperate to retain is eventually offered to a version of himself that is less real, less vital, and less capable of the genuine connection that real love requires. The law that dissolves this fear is the understanding that a man who has no self to offer cannot offer himself in love. The development of your own character, your own purpose, your own potential is not a threat to love. It is the foundation on which love of any lasting value is built. A man who is becoming his best self is a man who has something genuine to give. Give that, and retain only those who can receive it. The rest was never the love you needed. I declare now that I am worthy of love because I am committed to becoming. I give myself permission to grow, and I trust that genuine love grows with me. The fifth ghost is the fear of old age. This ghost arrives quietly, usually in the middle of a man's life, and whispers to him that the best years are behind him, that the energy required for great things was a property of youth that he no longer possesses, that to attempt something large and uncertain at this stage of life is the behavior of a man who has not accepted reality. The fear of old age persuades men to stop, not because stopping is wise, but because the ghost has convinced them that motion is no longer appropriate for a man of their years. It is a peculiarly cruel fear because it disguises the surrender of ambition as the acceptance of maturity. The man who has given up calls himself realistic. He does not acknowledge the ghost because the ghost has become his philosophy. The law that destroys this fear is the historical record itself, which is filled with men who produced their greatest work at an age when the fear of old age would have them settled into irrelevance. Carnegie built his greatest philanthropic empire in his later years. Edison was producing significant inventions well into his 70s. The fear of old age has no power over a man whose purpose is larger than his biography, because such a man does not measure his relevance by the number of his years, but by the size of his remaining intention. You are as young as your dominant desire. You are as old as your settled resignation. I declare now that my purpose has no expiration date. My best work is the work I am about to do. The sixth ghost is the fear of death itself. I will not spend long here because the man who has embraced the first five laws has already neutralized most of the power this ghost holds. But let me say this. The fear of death is, at its root, the fear that there is no meaning in living, because a man who has found genuine meaning does not fear the ending of the vehicle through which meaning is expressed. He has delivered his contribution. He has planted his seeds. He has served the law with everything he had. The ending of the physical body is not the ending of the influence, because influence lives in the minds it has shaped, and in the actions those minds have taken, and in the world those actions have built. Carnegie is dead, but the libraries stand. Edison is dead, but the light still burns. Ford is dead, but the machines still run. Die in service of your purpose, and you will not truly die. I declare now that my life has meaning because I have given it meaning through the commitment of my full self to my definite chief aim. I do not fear the ending of my days. I fear only the wasting of them. Now I want to speak to you about the mastermind principle, because no man rises to greatness alone. This is not sentiment, this is a law. Carnegie told me directly, and this is the law from which he built the largest steel fortune in American history, that no mind is complete by itself. Every human being is equipped with a certain range of thought, a certain set of faculties, a certain capacity for organization and creative vision. But that range, however wide in the exceptional individual, can always be multiplied by the deliberate alliance of that mind with other minds organized around a common purpose. This is the mastermind, not a committee, not a collection of people meeting to discuss, an alliance of minds, two or more, working in harmony toward a definite purpose, with each mind contributing its full power to the collective aim, without reservation and without competition within the alliance. Carnegie himself admitted that he knew almost nothing about the technical process of making steel. What he knew was how to select men who did know, organize them around his definite purpose, inspire them to contribute their full mental power to that purpose, and then direct the collective intelligence of the group toward the specific outcomes he had decided to achieve. He told me that the mastermind was his single greatest discovery in the science of achievement. Not capital, not connections, not technical knowledge. The mastermind. The multiplication of mental power through harmonious alliance. Edison's laboratory was itself a mastermind. It was not a collection of isolated inventors working separately on separate problems. It was a deliberate alliance of minds, all organized around Edison's definite purpose, all contributing their specific knowledge and capacity, all moving toward a common aim that none of them could have achieved individually in the same period of time. The rate of invention that came out of that laboratory was not the product of Edison's individual genius alone. It was the product of organized, harmonious, allied mental power, which is a force of an entirely different magnitude from the sum of its individual parts. The man who attempts to achieve his definite chief aim entirely through his own mental power alone is like a man who attempts to move a locomotive with his own muscles. The locomotive can be moved, but not by one man's unaided effort. The mastermind principle is the engine that provides the power that the individual effort cannot generate alone. Consider carefully who you allow into your inner circle of thought. Every person whose mind you regularly encounter either adds to or subtracts from your mental power. The man who spends his hours among those who have no definiteness of purpose, no burning desire, no organized thought, no faith in the law of achievement, that man is not merely standing still. He is moving backward, because the combined thought of the people around him is a force that acts upon his own thought, modifying it, diluting it, and eventually bringing it into alignment with itself. This is not the judgment of those people. It is the operation of a law so reliable that it makes no exceptions. You become the dominant character of the five minds you most consistently associate with. Choose accordingly, and choose with the seriousness of a man who understands that this choice is among the most consequential he will ever make. The law of cosmic habit force is perhaps the most powerful principle I have ever committed to paper, and I have spent the better part of my life putting principles to paper. Cosmic habit force is the law by which the universe maintains order. Every planet in its orbit, every cell in its cycle, every atom in its motion is governed by this law. Repetition sustained over time becomes pattern. Pattern sustained over time becomes automatic. The automatic is the efficient. The efficient is the powerful. And the powerful is, over time, the destiny. This law operates in your life whether you know it or not, whether you approve of it or not, whether it is building the life you intend or the life you have drifted into by default. The law has no preference. It enforces what you have practiced. This is why this night matters. Not because of what you decide tonight in the abstract, but because of what you practice tonight in the particular. The practice that you begin tonight, if you begin it with definiteness, with emotional conviction, and with the commitment to continue it without exception, will become within 90 days a habit of thought so deeply embedded in the architecture of your subconscious mind that it will require no more effort to maintain than breathing. The cosmic habit force will take over. The new thought pattern will become the automatic pattern. And what is automatic becomes the operating program of your life, generating results with the relentless efficiency of a law of nature, rather than the effortful irregularity of an occasional intention. This is why the nights are so important. This is what I want you to understand about the hours of sleep that most men treat as mere biological necessity. When the body is still and the conscious mind releases its watchfulness and the gateway to the subconscious swings open, the thoughts that are present in that transition moment enter the subconscious with exceptional force. They are received not as casual information but as instruction. They are installed in the deepest programming of the mind with the efficiency that only the sleeping hours can provide. The poor man's repeated secret is spoken most powerfully in this exact moment, in the transition between waking and sleep, and the subconscious receives it and builds with it through all the hours of the night. This is why I am teaching you here, in these hours, at this time, when your body is settling toward rest and your conscious resistance is softening and your deepest mind is becoming receptive. Everything I have told you tonight has been entering your subconscious through the same door that the poor man's fear enters his. The difference is the content of what is being delivered. The poor man delivers fear, doubt, inadequacy, and the settled certainty of limitation. You, in this moment, are delivering the law, the principle, the organized thought of a man who has decided to become more than he has been. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them, speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you. I understand the law of cosmic habit force. I understand that what I practice becomes what I am. I am now practicing the thought of abundance. I am practicing the thought of definiteness. I am practicing the thought of faith in the invisible machinery of my subconscious mind, which is working for me without ceasing. Every night that I sleep, my subconscious continues to build. Every night that I carry into sleep the thought of my definite chief aim, my subconscious installs that thought more deeply, more permanently, into the operating pattern of my life. I choose what I carry into sleep. Tonight I carry the thought of my purpose, my power, my progress, and my absolute certainty that the law is working in my favor. I am building a habit of faith. The law of cosmic habit force will enforce this habit, and it will become my destiny. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. Now I want to teach you about the law of going the extra mile, because there is perhaps no principle more immediately available to every man, regardless of his current station, than this one. The extra mile is the distance between what you are paid to do and what you choose to do. Most men stop precisely at the line of their obligation. They deliver what was agreed upon and not 1 ounce more, because they have reasoned, with the logic of the drifting man, that additional effort without additional immediate compensation is a form of being cheated. This reasoning is both understandable and catastrophically wrong. It is wrong because it misunderstands the law of compensation, which states that reward always seeks its level, and that a man who consistently delivers more than he is currently compensated for creates an imbalance in the law of compensation that the law itself must eventually correct. No man who has consistently gone the extra mile through his entire life has died without being compensated for it, because the law of compensation does not permit an imbalance of that duration to stand uncorrected. Charles M. Schwab understood this principle better than almost any man of his era, and it made him one of the wealthiest men in America. He did not begin at the top of Carnegie's organization. He began at the very bottom, shoveling in a steel mill for $1 a day. But from his first day, Schwab delivered more than $1's worth of effort. He delivered $2, $3, $10 of effort for that dollar's wage, not because he was foolish, but because he had understood, either through native wisdom or through observation of those who had risen before him, that the man who habitually does more than he is paid for draws the attention of those who have the power to pay him for what he actually delivers. Carnegie observed Schwab. Carnegie saw in him what he had seen in almost no other man, which was the willingness to serve beyond the measure of immediate reward. And Carnegie elevated him accordingly, until Schwab was earning, under Carnegie's patronage, more than $1 million a year, at a time when $1 million a year was among the largest personal incomes on the face of the earth. That is the law of the extra mile in operation, not as sentiment, not as moral principle, though it is that too, as a mechanical law that governs the distribution of reward. The man who always does more than he is paid for will always eventually be paid for more than he does. The man who does precisely what he is paid for and nothing more has ensured, with mathematical certainty, that he will never be paid for more. The law delivers exactly what you have practiced. Now let me speak about the law that governs the multiplication of all mental power through the organized effort of the allied mind, the mastermind in its full expression. And I want to go deeper into this principle than I have gone before, because I have found in 20 years of teaching that most men hear the mastermind principle and reduce it to something social, something networked, something that sounds like the advice to choose better friends. That understanding, while not entirely wrong, captures only the surface of a principle whose depth goes all the way to the foundation of human achievement. When Carnegie first explained the mastermind to me, I expected him to describe it in practical terms, in terms of delegation and organizational structure. Instead, he described it in terms of a phenomenon he had personally observed and that astonished him every time he witnessed it. He told me that when two minds come together in a spirit of harmony and in pursuit of a definite common aim, something is created between those two minds that was not present in either of them individually. Not the sum of the two intelligences, something new. A third intelligence, generated by the harmony and the definiteness of the alliance, that is capable of solving problems and perceiving solutions that neither mind alone could have reached. He described this third intelligence as a force that enters from outside the two individuals, drawn by the harmony of their thought and the definiteness of their common aim, and that works through both of them simultaneously in ways that neither of them can fully account for. I have since observed this phenomenon dozens of times in the lives of the great achievers I studied. It is not coincidence, it is law. The mastermind, when properly constituted, when the alliance is genuine and the purpose is definite and the harmony is real, becomes a channel through which infinite intelligence, the organizing intelligence of the universe itself, flows into the human situation in a concentrated and purposeful way. This is not mysticism dressed in the language of business. This is the most practical law I have ever reported, because it explains why the great achievements of human civilization have all been produced by groups of people organized around a common aim, and why the isolated genius, however exceptional, has always underperformed relative to the organized alliance of even ordinary minds working in harmony toward a purpose they share with total conviction. John D. Rockefeller understood this law and applied it with a precision that was almost mathematical. His organization of Standard Oil was not merely a business structure. It was a mastermind of the highest order, a deliberate arrangement of specific minds, each contributing specific capacities, all organized around a single definite aim, all working in a harmony that Rockefeller maintained through the clarity of his purpose and the consistency of his leadership. His critics called his organization a monopoly and a conspiracy. What it actually was, at the level of principle, was the most sophisticated application of the mastermind law that the oil industry had ever seen. He identified the law. He applied it. The law delivered the results that laws always deliver when properly applied. Whether one approves of every particular of Rockefeller's business conduct is a separate question. At the level of principle, which is the level I teach at, the application was masterful. Now consider carefully the inverse of this principle. Just as a harmonious alliance of minds organized around a definite aim generates a force greater than the sum of its individual parts, a discordant alliance, one in which there is conflict, competition, or misalignment of aims, generates a force that is less than any of its individual parts. Two minds working in opposition do not cancel each other out. They actively undermine each other. They consume in conflict the very energy that could have been directed toward creation. This is why Carnegie was so ruthless about the quality of harmony within his mastermind. He would discharge a man not for incompetence, but for disharmony, not for the failure to contribute talent, but for the failure to contribute to the unity of purpose that made the talent of everyone else available at full capacity. He understood that one mind in genuine discord with the group's aim did not merely subtract its own contribution. It subtracted a portion of every other contribution as well, because the group's attention was partially consumed by managing the discord, rather than entirely available for advancing the aim. Examine your own alliances with this understanding. Not merely whether the people around you are talented or successful or well-intentioned, but whether they are in genuine harmony with your definite aim. The man who is kind but doubtful, the man who is loyal but limiting, the man who is comfortable but contracted in his vision of what is possible. Such men may be dear to you, but they are not your mastermind. Your mastermind is assembled from people whose thought expands your thought, whose faith reinforces your faith, whose definiteness sharpens your definiteness, and whose presence in your inner circle multiplies rather than divides the mental power available to your aim. This is not cruelty toward those who do not qualify. It is the responsible stewardship of the one resource that determines the course of your life above all others, which is the quality of the thought you most consistently entertain. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them. Speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you, I am building my mastermind with deliberate intention. I seek those whose minds expand mine, whose faith is genuine, whose purpose aligns with my own, and whose presence multiplies the mental power I can direct toward my definite chief aim. I release all alliances that diminish my thought, that welcome my doubt, that celebrate my limitations. I am worthy of the company of great minds, and I attract those minds by becoming the kind of mind that great people seek. I am organized in my thought. I am definite in my purpose. I am harmonious in my alliances. The mastermind principle is operating in my life now, drawing to me the specific people whose minds and capacities will accelerate my journey toward my definite aim. I welcome them. I serve them. And together we produce what none of us could produce alone. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. I want to return now to the law of cosmic habit force with even greater depth, because this is the law that will either make everything else I have taught you permanent, or allow it to fade back into interesting information within a week of your first hearing it. Cosmic habit force is not merely the observation that habits are powerful. It is the recognition that habit is the mechanism by which the entire universe maintains its order, from the motion of galaxies to the behavior of cells, and that this same mechanism operates in the life of every human being with equal reliability. What you do repeatedly, you become. What you become, you perpetuate. What you perpetuate becomes self-reinforcing, because the cosmic habit force begins to enforce it the way gravity enforces the fall of an object, automatically, without requiring your conscious participation, without pausing to ask your preference, without offering you the option of taking a day off from the law. Here is the most sobering implication of the cosmic habit force as it applies to the man who has been drifting. His drift is not merely a series of passive choices that he could reverse at any moment by simply deciding to choose differently. His drift has become, through years of repetition, a habit of such depth that the cosmic habit force is now actively maintaining it. The drifting has become automatic. The doubt has become reflexive. The acceptance of limitation has become the default operating program of his mind, enforced not just by his own repeated choices, but by the law of the universe itself, which maintains whatever pattern has been sufficiently established through repetition. This is a sobering fact, but it is not a hopeless one, because the same mechanism that has been enforcing the drift can be redirected. The cosmic habit force enforces pattern. It does not care which pattern. It will enforce the drift with the same impartiality with which it will enforce the new pattern of definiteness and faith, provided the new pattern is established through sufficient repetition at sufficient emotional intensity to override the old program. This is the work. This is the actual work of transformation, not the single decision made in a moment of inspiration, but the sustained, daily, emotionally charged repetition of the new thought pattern until the cosmic habit force takes it up and makes it automatic. 90 days. That is the time frame I have observed most consistently in the lives of those who have applied these principles with genuine commitment. Within 90 days of consistent daily practice, the autosuggestion daily exercise spoken with conviction morning and evening, the definite chief aim kept before the conscious mind through the day, the extra mile walked in every available circumstance, the mastermind cultivated through deliberate association, the ghosts of fear dissolved through the specific counterlaws whenever they arise. Within 90 days of this consistent practice, the new pattern begins to show the signs of having been taken up by the cosmic habit force. The new thought becomes easier, the doubt becomes less reflexive, the faith becomes more natural. The old program begins to lose its hold, not because it has been argued into submission, but because the new program has been repeated into dominance. This is why 90 days of perfect application produces a different man than 90 days of occasional application followed by periods of drift. It is not because the occasional applier lacks intelligence or sincerity. It is because the cosmic habit force requires a consistent signal to register the new pattern as dominant. An inconsistent signal reads as noise. A consistent signal reads as instruction. And the cosmic habit force enforces the instruction with the reliability of a law of physics. I am going to speak to you now about what I observed in the life of Abraham Lincoln, because Lincoln is the most complete demonstration of every principle I have taught you tonight, and because his story is the one that I find most powerfully illustrates the truth that there is no circumstance of poverty, no sequence of failure, no accumulation of loss, and no weight of grief sufficient to prevent a man from arriving at his greatness, if that man has organized his thought around a definite aim, sustained his faith through the mechanism of autosuggestion in its most fundamental form, spoken his truth into the air with the conviction of a man who has heard from a law higher than public opinion, and refused, absolutely and without compromise, to abandon the field in the season of his silent harvest. Lincoln failed in business. Lincoln lost elections. Lincoln suffered the deaths of people he loved most in the world. Lincoln was mocked by his contemporaries, called incompetent by his opponents, and underestimated by almost everyone who met him for the first 40 years of his life. And through all of this, something in Lincoln did not bend, did not break, did not abandon the field. What was that thing? It was a definite aim so deeply embedded in the architecture of his character that the cosmic habit force had long since taken it up as the organizing principle of his mental life. It was the aim of justice, of union, of the completion of the American promise that had been declared and not yet delivered. He did not hold this aim in the abstract. He held it with the specificity of a man who can see the particular shape of the thing he intends, and who is therefore not confused by the distance between where he stands and where he is going, but is instead simply engaged in the next step of the walk. The night before Lincoln delivered the Emancipation Proclamation, knowing that it would make him the target of forces whose fury he could not fully anticipate, knowing that the political cost could be everything he had built and everything he intended to build, Lincoln was reported by those close to him to have been remarkably calm. Not the calm of a man who does not feel the weight of what he is about to do. The calm of a man whose inner world has already settled the question, whose subconscious has already accepted the instruction, whose faith has been manufactured through years of autosuggestion in the most primal sense. The daily practice of committing to his purpose regardless of the evidence his senses delivered. That calm is the evidence of a man who has given the instruction to his subconscious so many times, so consistently, so with such emotional conviction, that the cosmic habit force has taken it up, and what was once a decision he made is now simply who he is. He does not have to decide to do the right thing in the crisis moment, because the right thing has long since become his automatic response. The cosmic habit force has made it so. That is what I am offering you tonight. Not the temporary inspiration of a good feeling that fades by morning. The permanent reorganization of your automatic thought, your reflexive response, your identity at the level of the cosmic habit force, through the consistent and deliberate application of the principles I have taught you. This is the science. This is the law. And the law, applied with the commitment of Lincoln, delivers the result of Lincoln, not necessarily in political power, but in the equally complete satisfaction of having become, in full, what you were placed on this earth to become. Now let me speak to you about organized planning, because the burning desire and the faith and the auto-suggestion and the mastermind must all be organized into action through a plan that is as definite as the aim it serves. The man who has a burning desire but no plan is a man with an engine and no road. The energy is real. The power is genuine. But without the specific, organized sequence of actions that converts the desire into progress, the energy dissipates into the atmosphere, and the man is left exactly where he started, feeling briefly inspired and permanently unchanged. Carnegie did not build his empire on inspiration alone. He built it on organized planning of the most meticulous order. For every objective, he could specify the resources required, the actions to be taken, the sequence in which they would be taken, the people who would be involved, and the criteria by which progress would be measured. His mastermind was organized around his plan with the precision of a military campaign. And I use that metaphor deliberately because Carnegie studied military history, and specifically the organizational genius of the great military commanders as a model for how organized planning could be applied to business and wealth creation. The plan, let me be specific about this, does not need to be perfect before you begin. In fact, it cannot be perfect before you begin, because the information required to make the plan perfect is only available through the experience of executing the plan. Ford did not have a perfect plan for the assembly line before he built it. He had a sufficient plan, organized around his definite aim, and he began. And as he executed the plan, the experience of execution revealed the adjustments that made the plan better, and he made them, and continued. The man who waits until his plan is perfect before he begins will wait forever, because the plan never reaches perfection in the absence of the experience that perfects it. What I am instructing you to do is this. Take your definite chief aim, the one burning desire you have selected as the organizing principle of your life, and write a plan. Not the perfect plan, the first plan. Write down in as much specific detail as you can presently command the steps you believe will move you from where you are to the accomplishment of your aim. Identify the people you will need. Identify the knowledge you will need to acquire. Identify the resources you will need to assemble. Identify the first 3 actions you will take, and take them before another week has passed. The plan will be imperfect. The plan will require revision. The plan may require complete reinvention at some point, as many of the greatest plans in history required. That is not failure. That is the intelligence of organized thought responding to new information. Keep the aim constant. Allow the plan to be as flexible as the circumstances require, but do not allow the plan's imperfection to become the excuse for remaining in the position of having a desire but no direction. Direction, even imperfect direction, is infinitely more productive than perfect understanding coupled with perfect stillness. Now, I want to speak with you about the daily architecture of a life governed by the principles I have taught tonight. Because understanding the law is not the same as living the law, and living the law requires a structure to the day that keeps the principles active in the conscious mind until the cosmic habit force has made them automatic. I want to give you the exact architecture, the daily practice, the morning and evening ritual through which the man who has received this teaching transmits it to his subconscious with the repetition and the emotional intensity that the law requires. In the morning, before you eat, before you address the claims of the world, before you speak to anyone, read your definite aim aloud. One statement, written in the first person, written in the present tense, stating what you are in the process of accomplishing and by what date and through what service you intend to render in exchange for it. Read it with the voice of a man who is not requesting but reporting. Read it with the physical sensation, even if only imagined and not yet felt, of the desire fulfilled. Spend 5 minutes in this practice. 5 minutes is sufficient. Less will not build the momentum the law requires. More is available to you if the desire pulls you there. In the evening, before you sleep, when the gate to the subconscious is swinging open, read it again. But in the evening, after reading it, sit in silence for 2 minutes and allow your imagination to build a clear picture of the life you are building. Not a vague impression of success, a specific scene. The specific office, the specific home, the specific conversation with a specific person who congratulates you on the specific achievement of your specific aim. The specificity of the imagination is the specificity of the instruction you are delivering to the subconscious. Vague imagination delivers a vague instruction and the subconscious builds a vague result. Specific imagination delivers a specific instruction, and the subconscious builds with specific fidelity. During the day, whenever a thought of doubt or fear or limitation presents itself, do not argue with it. Argument gives the thought energy. Instead, replace it immediately with a single-sentence statement of your definite aim, spoken under your breath or in your mind with the conviction that I have been teaching you to develop. The replacement does not need to be loud. It needs to be definite. And the definiteness, repeated every time the doubt appears, trains the subconscious through the mechanism of autosuggestion and begins, through the law of cosmic habit force, to make the definite thought the automatic response and the doubt the exceptional experience rather than the rule. This is the daily architecture. Morning autosuggestion, evening autosuggestion and imagination, daytime replacement of doubt with definiteness, going the extra mile in every action, cultivating the mastermind through deliberate association, dissolving each ghost of fear with its specific counter law every time it arises, walking the extra mile, holding controlled attention on the definite aim. This is the practice. This is the law in daily application. And 90 days of this practice will produce a man whose inner world has been so thoroughly reorganized by these principles that the outer world must, by the operation of the same law that has always governed it, begin to reflect the new inner reality. Now let me speak to you about the law of controlled attention, which is the master discipline of all achievement and the skill most thoroughly destroyed by the conditions of modern life. And the skill most thoroughly destroyed by the conditions of modern life. Controlled attention is the ability to hold the focused force of your thought upon a single object of your intention for a sustained period, excluding all competing claims upon that thought, until the object yields to the pressure of organized mental force. This is not concentration in the popular sense of that word, which suggests effort and strain and the white-knuckled attempt to resist distraction. Controlled attention, properly understood and properly developed, is effortless, because it is the natural state of a mind that has a burning desire. When a man truly desires something, the mind naturally returns to it. The distraction that plagues the unfocused man is the symptom of a mind that has no burning desire, or more precisely, a mind that has many competing desires of equal and insufficient heat. The man who has fixed his definite chief aim with the burning intensity I have described does not struggle to focus his attention. His attention returns to his aim the way a compass needle returns to north. It is not forced, it is drawn. The work of developing controlled attention is therefore not the work of developing concentration through willpower. It is the work of developing the burning desire so completely, so hotly, so specifically, that the mind's natural magnetic pull toward the object of greatest desire becomes the organizing force of the entire mental life. When desire burns at sufficient heat, attention follows automatically and sustained. Focused mental power becomes not an achievement, but a natural consequence. Ford's genius was not technical, it was attentional. He could hold the force of his organized thought upon a single problem, a single intention, a single vision of what he intended to build, with a consistency that exhausted the men around him. His engineers would abandon a problem as unsolvable, and Ford would continue to hold his attention upon it, not through strain, but through the natural pull of a desire that had not been satisfied, and therefore could not be released. The answer always came, because the attention was always there, because the desire never cooled. This is the mechanism. This is how the great achievements of human history were produced, not by men of greater intelligence than you possess, but by men whose desire burned more consistently, and whose attention was therefore held more naturally on the object of that desire. The enemy of controlled attention in the life of the modern man is not laziness. It is the fragmentation of desire. When a man wants many things with equal intensity, he moves in many directions with equal effort and arrives nowhere in particular with exceptional consistency. The cure is not to want less. The cure is to identify the one thing that represents the fullest expression of your purpose, to desire that one thing with such total commitment that all other desires become expressions of it rather than competitors to it, and then to allow the natural attentional force that follows burning desire to hold your mind upon that target with the constancy that produces results. The law of transmutation of desire is the law by which the invisible becomes visible, by which the internal becomes external, by which the thought becomes the thing. This is the capstone principle, the law that explains every other law and ties every teaching I have offered you tonight into a single coherent mechanism. Desire, when organized by definiteness of purpose, when reinforced by the daily practice of autosuggestion, when delivered consistently to a receptive subconscious mind, when held in the field of focused attention and multiplied by the harmonious alliance of a mastermind, when expressed through the extra effort of the man who goes beyond his obligation, when protected from the 6 ghosts of fear by the specific counter laws I have given you, such desire does not remain desire. It transmutes, it changes state, it becomes physical, it becomes circumstance. It becomes the tangible equivalent of the invisible intention that produced it. This is not a promise I make to you. This is a law I report to you. It has operated in the life of every great achiever who has ever lived. It operated in the life of Carnegie, who transmuted the burning desire for wealth into the greatest steel empire in history, and then transmuted the desire for libraries that still stand on every continent. It operated in the life of Edison, who transmuted the burning desire to illuminate the world into the light that now burns in every home on earth. It operated in the life of Lincoln, who transmuted the burning desire for justice into the most consequential moral legislation in the history of the nation, against opposition so fierce and so personal that it would have destroyed any man whose desire was less than burning. And it will operate in your life with the same precision and the same reliability if you apply the same principles with the same consistency. The silent harvest is the name I give to the moment when all the invisible work becomes visible. There is always a gap between the planting and the harvest, and it is in this gap that most men abandon the field. They have planted, they have watered, they have done what they were supposed to do, but the crop has not yet appeared above the ground, and the season seems long, and the field looks bare, and the doubt that was always present but suppressed rises again with the news that nothing is happening. And in this moment, more dreams are abandoned than at any other point in the human journey, because the man does not understand that the most important work of growth always happens underground, in the dark, invisibly, and that the appearance of nothing happening is in fact the signal that everything is happening, and that the harvest is closer than it has ever been. I have watched this pattern in the lives of great achievers more times than I can count. The period immediately before the breakthrough is always the period of greatest apparent stagnation. Carnegie's fortune did not grow steadily and visibly from his first day of effort. It grew invisibly, in the relationships he was building, the reputation he was accumulating, the organized thought he was developing, the men he was aligning with his purpose. And then one day it arrived above ground all at once, and everyone who had not seen the underground work called it sudden success. Edison's 10,000 failures were the underground work of the light bulb. Barnes's years of menial labor at Edison's laboratory were the underground work of the partnership that eventually made him wealthy. Lincoln's decades of political failure, of personal loss, of seemingly unending defeat, were the underground work of the moral authority and the organizational leadership that the presidency required, and that nothing but that specific sequence of suffering could have produced. Your underground work is happening now. Every night that you carry the right thought into sleep, every morning that you speak your definite aim with conviction before the world offers its contradictions, every day that you go the extra mile when obligation would have permitted you to stop, every moment that you hold your attention on your purpose when distraction offers its easier path, every alliance you build with a mind that strengthens your own, every ghost of fear that you dissolve with the specific law I have given you. Every day that you do all of this is a day of underground growth. The harvest is coming. The law guarantees it. Your only job is to not abandon the field. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them. Speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you, I am in the season of my silent harvest. What I have planted in my mind and in my habits is growing underground, growing in the dark, growing without my observation, but not without the faithful operation of the law. I do not need to see the crop to trust the law. I do not need immediate visible evidence to maintain my faith. The law is operating. The subconscious is building. The circumstances are reorganizing around the dominant thought I have installed. I am patient with the process because I understand the process. I continue my daily practice. I continue my auto-suggestion. I continue my going of the extra mile. I continue my alliance with minds that strengthen my own. I continue to carry my definite purpose into every night of sleep. The harvest is coming. It cannot be prevented by anything outside me. It can only be prevented by my abandonment of the field, and I do not abandon what I have planted with my faith. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. Now we have arrived at the threshold. You are not the same person who began listening to these words. You cannot be, because you have received into your mind during these hours a body of law that was not present in your mind before, and the subconscious mind, which receives all things that are delivered to it with emotional intensity, has been receiving these laws as they were delivered to you. Something has shifted. You may not yet be able to name it. You may not yet see its evidence in the physical world around you, but the underground work has begun, and it began at the first word of this teaching, and it has not stopped, and it will not stop, because the law that has been set in motion does not require your permission to continue. You have learned tonight that the outer world is always the mirror of the inner world. You have learned the difference between wishing and deciding, and you have made your decision, or if you have not yet made it, I am instructing you to make it now, before you carry yourself into sleep. You have learned that faith is manufactured, not received, and you have been given the exact mechanism of its manufacture. You have learned that the subconscious mind builds whatever it receives without judgment, and that you are now taking conscious control of what you deliver to it. You have faced the 6 ghosts of fear, and you have in your possession the specific laws that dissolve each one. You have understood the mastermind principle, and you know now what kind of minds you must seek and what kind you must release. You have understood the law of cosmic habit force, And you know that what you practice in these nights consistently and with conviction will become, by the power of that law, your automatic operating program, your identity, and therefore your destiny. You have understood the extra mile, and you know that going beyond what is required is not loss, but investment in the law of compensation. You have understood controlled attention as the natural consequence of burning desire, not the product of willpower. And you know, therefore, that the work is not the work of forcing focus, but the work of deepening desire. You have understood transmutation, which is the law by which the invisible becomes visible. And you know that what you are carrying in your mind tonight will become, by the unfailing operation of this law, the circumstances of your tomorrow. This is the moment before the night takes you. The body is settling. The conscious mind is releasing its grip. The gate to the subconscious is swinging open. And you have a choice in this moment that is more consequential than you may fully appreciate. You can carry into sleep the same thought that the poor man has been carrying into sleep for all the nights of his life, the thought of what he lacks, of what has not worked, of what he fears, of what he cannot imagine changing. Or you can carry in a different instruction, a specific, burning, emotionally charged declaration of the life you have decided to live and the person you have decided to become. I am instructing you now to take one thought into sleep with you, one thought only. Make it the thought of your definite chief aim, stated as if it were already accomplished. State it in the present tense. State it with specific detail. State it with the emotion of a man who is grateful for what he already has, not the emotion of a man who is pleading for what he hopes to receive. The subconscious mind responds to gratitude as it responds to all emotional intensity, with the immediate organization of its building capacity around the object of that emotion. Take this thought with you. I am in the process of achieving my definite chief aim. The subconscious mind working within me is organizing every resource available to it, every thought, every intuition, every encounter, every creative solution in service of this achievement. I rest now in the absolute certainty that the law is working. I release all effort. I release all anxiety. I release all urgency. The work continues without my conscious participation because the subconscious mind does not sleep, because the law does not rest, because the instruction has been delivered with faith, and the builder within me is faithful to the instruction. Let your body grow heavy. Let your breath slow to its resting rhythm. Let the tension of the day dissolve from your muscles and your mind. You have done what was yours to do in these hours. You have received the law. You have spoken it with your own voice into your own ears. You have delivered it to the subconscious mind through the mechanism of auto-suggestion. Now the subconscious mind takes over, and you enter the most productive period of your 24 hours. The period when the greatest builder in your possession works without the interference of conscious doubt or the obstruction of momentary fear. The thought you take into sleep is this: I am becoming, I am building, I am moving toward my purpose with every breath I draw, even in rest. The law is faithful to me because I am faithful to the law. Let that thought deepen now. Let it sink past the level of conscious awareness. Let it enter the part of you that does not sleep, the part of you that is always building, always organizing, always seeking the next step toward the goal you have committed to. You do not need to hold the thought tightly. Release it. Let it fall into the depth of your subconscious the way a stone falls into a still, deep lake. It will find the bottom. It will settle there. And when you rise tomorrow, it will still be there, having been received, having been installed, having been worked upon through all the hours of your sleep by the most powerful builder in the universe, the subconscious mind operating under the direction of a definite purpose delivered with faith. You are not the same. You will not be the same. The work that began in this moment will not stop unless you stop it, and I am instructing you not to stop it. Now speak these 7 commands aloud. Speak them before you sleep. Speak them with the voice of a person who is not requesting, but declaring, not hoping, but knowing, not asking the universe for permission, but issuing to the law the instruction of a person who understands the law and has the courage to use it. I am the thinking cause of every condition in my life, and I choose from this moment forward to cause only the conditions that serve my definite chief aim. I carry into this night the thought of my purpose, my power, and my absolute faith in the invisible machinery of my subconscious mind, which is now building what I have commanded it to build. I dissolve every ghost of fear that has been given to me by a world that did not know the law, and I replace each ghost with the specific counter law that I now possess, and that I will apply without compromise. I seek and cultivate the alliance of minds that multiply my mental power, and I release from my inner circle every thought and every person that dilutes the force of my definite aim. I go the extra mile in every endeavor of my life, not as a sacrifice, but as the deliberate exercise of the law of compensation, which I know will deliver to me the full equivalent of every extra effort I invest. I am in the silent season of my greatest harvest, and I do not abandon the field because the crop has not yet appeared above ground. For I know the law of growth works most powerfully where it works most invisibly. I am a living demonstration of the science of achievement, and I carry its principles forward into every thought, every word, every action, and every night of restoring sleep, because I know that what I do in the silence builds what the world will one day see. Now let those 7 declarations settle into the foundation of your being. You have spoken them into the air. You have heard them with your own ears. You have delivered them to the subconscious through the mechanism of auto-suggestion. They are now installed. The law of cosmic habit force will enforce them. The subconscious mind will build from them. The world around you will in time reflect them, because the outer world is always and without exception the mirror of the inner world. And your inner world has just been rebuilt. You were given this teaching at exactly the right moment, not before you were ready to receive it, and not after you needed it. The law that brought you to this moment is the same law that will carry you from this moment forward into the life you have decided to live. Trust it, apply it, practice it without exception. And remember that the secret the poor man keeps repeating every night is not a sentence he speaks. It is a life he lives by default. The secret you will now repeat every night is different, and it will produce a different life. A life built not by default, but by design. Not by drift, but by decision. Not by fear, but by faith. What you think about when no one is watching is who you become when everyone is looking.